My name is Charlotte, and what I am about to share may sound unbelievable. People often say you never really know someone until life strips away the illusions. I believed I was living in a safe marriage for 5 years, raising our little boy Martin, who had just turned 4. I thought we were building a future together, but one night something as simple as a birthday cake revealed the cracks in my marriage and showed me the bitter truth my husband had never truly chosen me as his family. I remember standing in our quiet kitchen, the air heavy with the smell of leftover dinner. The lights were dim, Martin was humming a tune to himself, and I felt a flicker of contentment. Then the door opened, and Jane, my husband Kevin's much younger sister, marched in, uninvited, as usual. She laughed, tossed her coat on the chair, and acted like she owned the place. I forced a smile, but deep down, resentment burned. At first I had tolerated Jane's constant visits. She was 20 years old, still immature, and Kevin seemed protective of her. I thought it was just a sibling bond, but over time her behavior sharpened. She didn't see me, didn't even acknowledge Martin, and Kevin never corrected her. He expected me to serve her meals clean after her and be grateful that she was family. Every time I tried to raise my concerns, he silenced me with that same line, "She's my sister. Be considerate." But the cake night, that was the breaking point. Jane wanted cake. It was late, but Kevin barked at me to go buy one. I tried to reason with him, but he shouted louder, demanding I obey. So I grabbed Martin's tiny hand and walked into the chilly night. He looked up at me, his big eyes filled with curiosity, not judgment. "Mommy, can I have one with lots of fruit?" he asked. My heart cracked a little, but I nodded, grateful for his innocence. The store was closing, but by some miracle we found Jane's cake and Martin's fruit-filled delight. I thought maybe tonight will be okay. Maybe Kevin will see the effort. Back home, I placed Jane's cake in front of her and Kevin. Their laughter filled the room as if I didn't exist. Then I placed Martin's cake on the table. His eyes lit up. It was his special moment. But just as quickly, Jane pointed and said she wanted that one. Without hesitation, Kevin snatched the cake from Martin and slid it across to his sister. "I paid for it, I decide," he said flatly. Martin's tiny protest was swallowed by Kevin's authority. My son's tears rolled silently, his little fists clenched, but he didn't scream. He only turned to me, searching my face as if to ask why his father had taken his joy away. In that moment, I felt something die inside me. The man who once promised to cherish me had turned into someone who dismissed both his wife and his child for the comfort of his sister. I wanted to shout, to flip the table, to reclaim my son's dignity. But I froze, holding my breath, because if I spoke, Kevin would threaten me again. I knew it. And then Martin, sweet tender. Martin smiled through his tears. "Mom, I like strawberries," he whispered, forcing himself to eat a slice from Jane's stolen cake. My chest ached. My boy was learning to endure unfairness at only 4 years old, and it was my silence that allowed it. That night when Jane finally left, I tucked Martin into bed. His small hand clutched mine with unusual force. "Stay with me, Mom," he murmured. I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, hearing Kevin's laughter echo in my head. Something was unraveling. Something was changing. And I knew this was only the beginning of a storm I could no longer ignore. I share this because stories like mine often remain hidden behind polite smiles and quiet dinners. But they matter. If you've ever found yourself questioning the respect you receive in your own home, know this: your instincts are not wrong. Before I go deeper, I want to ask, where are you watching from? Share it in the comments, because stories of struggle and survival connect us all. And if you want to follow more journeys like mine, don't forget to subscribe. That night the cake wasn't just dessert. It was the first crack in the wall of lies. A signal that my marriage wasn't what I thought it was. And as I closed my eyes beside my son, I promised myself I would no longer ignore the truth. The next morning, I woke up with Martin curled beside me, his small breaths warm against my arm. I felt his little chest rise and fall, and I whispered a promise to myself I would protect him. But as soon as I walked into the kitchen, Kevin was already there, scrolling his phone like nothing had happened. Jane had stayed overnight sprawled across the couch, her shoes still on. My home no longer felt like mine. Kevin barely looked at me. Breakfast, he muttered, nodding toward his sister as if I was her servant. I wanted to scream. Instead, I cooked eggs while Martin tugged at my shirt, asking if we could go to the park later. My heart ached. He deserved joy, not this constant tension. Life with Kevin had shifted so dramatically from when we first met. Back then, he chased me with passion flowers and promises. He told me I was his future, the woman who made him whole. I believed him. I was only 21 when we started dating, and the world seemed wide open. He was 3 years older, confident, protective. I mistook control for love. Once we married, though, the mask slipped. Kevin became domineering. His words turned sharper, his patience shorter. He dismissed my opinions and expected obedience. When Jane visited, which was almost every day, his softer side returned, but only for her. He spoiled her like she was royalty, and I became the invisible maid in my own home. I still remember one night in the early years. Jane came over unannounced again. I had set the table for two, hoping Kevin and I might enjoy a quiet meal together. But when she walked in, Kevin lit up. He pulled out a chair for her, served her food, and left me standing. I ate cold leftovers in the kitchen while their laughter filled the dining room. That was the night I realized something: Kevin didn't see me as his equal. I was only there to manage his life, to keep things running while he played the doting brother. Every protest I made was twisted back at me. "She's family. You're being selfish. Why can't you just accept her?" he'd say. And if I stayed quiet, Jane would smirk like she'd won. Her apologies were always hollow, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction every time Kevin sided with her. I tried to convince myself it was temporary. Jane was young. Maybe she would mature. Maybe Kevin would eventually put us first. But Martin's birthday proved otherwise. Watching my little boy lose his cake, his joy to a selfish aunt and a cold father. I knew this wasn't going to change. As I scrubbed the dishes that morning, Jane tossed her hair back and sighed. "Charlotte, could you iron my dress? I'm meeting friends later." The entitlement in her voice made me clench my fists. Kevin didn't flinch. He looked at me, expecting compliance. My mind screamed, "I am not her maid, I am your wife, I am Martin's mother," but the words stuck in my throat. Martin ran up, holding his toy car, whispering, "Mom, can we go to the park?" After I bent down, kissed his forehead, and said softly, "Yes, sweetheart, we will." My voice shook, but I needed him to know that at least I would never fail him. And in that fragile moment, as I dried my hands and looked around the kitchen, Jane lounging, Kevin indifferent, Martin hopeful, I realized something monumental. I had been living in denial. This was not a marriage. It was a performance. Kevin loved power more than love itself. And before I go on, I want to pause here. If you've ever felt unseen in your own home, tell me in the comments. Your story might give someone else the courage to speak. And if you want to follow more of this journey, subscribe now, because what comes next is the moment my silence finally broke. That morning wasn't just another routine. It was the seed of awakening. For the first time, I saw Kevin not as my husband, but as a man who had already chosen his priorities, and Martin and I weren't on the list. The days after the cake incident carried a heavy silence. Martin sensed it, even if he didn't have the words. He clung to me more, asking innocent questions, like, "Mom, why is Daddy mad?" I swallowed my answers because how could I explain to a 4-year-old that his father chose his sister over his own family? One evening, Kevin came home later than usual. His eyes flicked over me coldly before landing on Jane, who was already lounging on our couch. They started chatting like I was invisible. I set dinner quietly, my stomach twisting. When Jane smirked at me, I knew something was coming. As we ate, Kevin suddenly leaned back in his chair. "Charlotte, did you remember to pick up the dry cleaning for Jane?" His tone wasn't a question, it was an order. Jane raised her brows, waiting for me to nod like a servant, but something inside me cracked. I placed my fork down slowly. "No, Kevin, I didn't." My voice was calm, but the air grew sharp. Martin froze mid-bite, his little hands gripping the spoon. Kevin's jaw clenched. So inconsiderate. Can't you think of anyone but yourself? The accusation burned. For years I had carried this household, cooking, cleaning, caring for Martin, managing bills, while Jane drifted in like a queen. And still I was the selfish one. Martin whispered, "Mom, it's okay," trying to calm the storm. But when Jane snickered, the sound pierced me deeper than any words. I cleaned the table in silence afterward. Kevin and Jane settled into the living room, flipping through TV channels. I stood at the sink, tears pricking my eyes, hands trembling in soapy water. Martin patted over his small hand, tugging my apron. "Mom, can I help?" His voice was so gentle it shattered me. That night when I tucked him in, he asked for a story. I couldn't read one. Instead, I told him softly, "One day, sweetheart, you'll learn that family means love, not just blood. And when people forget that we have to be brave." His sleepy eyes blinked at me, not fully understanding, but he wrapped his arms around my neck. "You're my best family, Mom." The words stayed with me. They reminded me of who I was before Kevin's shadow fell over me. Years ago, I had built something remarkable. I had been a leader, confident and respected. But after marriage, I shrank, convinced that being a good wife meant silence. Now Martin's trust demanded more of me. Let me ask you, have you ever faced someone twisting the word family to control you? Share in the comments. I want to hear your voice. And if you want to stand with me as I unfold the rest of this journey, make sure you're subscribed. We need each other in these conversations. The following day, the tension broke open. Kevin demanded I drive Jane across town for a shopping trip. I refused, telling him I had work. His eyes turned to steel. "Then why are you even here? You can't even be useful." Martin, holding his toy car, stood frozen by the doorway. His little lip trembled as Kevin stormed out with Jane. I rushed to Martin, kneeling before him. "You are not useless, and neither am I whispered, though the words were meant as much for myself as for him. That moment planted a seed of resistance in me. Kevin's contempt had been tolerated too long. I was done letting Jane treat my house as hers. I was done watching my son learn that silence equals survival. But I also knew this confrontation would bring consequences. Kevin wasn't the man to admit fault. He would escalate. And he did. The very next night, he pushed boundaries further than ever before. The night that broke me began with a simple request from Martin. He had been quiet all evening, sitting on the floor with his blocks, while Jane scrolled her phone on our couch, and Kevin watched television beside her. I was folding laundry, trying to push through the fog of exhaustion. "Mom," Martin whispered, tugging at my sleeve. "Can we have our cake now?" His big brown eyes sparkled with the kind of excitement only a 4-year-old could carry. I smiled, grateful for that small light, and headed to the fridge. I had bought him a cake filled with fruit just like he wanted. His moment of joy. I placed the small plate in front of him. His face lit up like the sun, little hands reaching eagerly. But before he could take a bite, Jane leaned forward, pointing. "I want that one." I froze, the knife still in my hand. Kevin glanced from Jane to Martin, and in one swift motion, he grabbed the plate from our son and slid it across the table. "She gets what she wants," he declared, his voice sharp. "I bought it. I decide." Martin's lower lip quivered, his tiny fists clenched. His eyes brimmed with tears. But he didn't scream. He didn't throw the tantrum Kevin probably expected. Instead, he looked at me, searching my face for reassurance, for protection. Something inside me shattered. I had endured the insults, the dismissals, the constant humiliation from Kevin and Jane. But watching my son's joy stolen in front of me, that was unbearable. I stepped forward. "Kevin, that cake was for Martin. He asked for it. He deserves—" "Enough," Kevin roared, cutting me off. His fist slammed the table, rattling the dishes. "You're ungrateful. You should be thankful I even allow you to live here." His eyes blazed with anger, and then with a cruel smirk he added, "If you don't like it, you can leave." "Don't test me, Charlotte. I'll end this marriage tonight." The room went silent. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely breathe. Divorce. He had threatened it before, but this time his words hung in the air like a sentence. Martin's tears finally spilled over. He pushed his chair back, running into my arms. "Mom, it's okay," he whispered, voice trembling. "I like strawberries too. It's good, really good. He forced a smile, taking a bite from the cake Jane now held triumphantly. The sight of my little boy comforting me when he should have been protected, it broke me in ways I can't describe. I scooped him up, his small arms wrapping around my neck, and carried him to his room. Behind me, Jane laughed softly, and Kevin muttered, "Pathetic." In Martin's room, I placed the plate back in his hands. "Eat, sweetheart. This is yours." He took a bite, eyes brightening just a little. I brushed his hair back, whispering, "No one will ever take your happiness away again." That night I lay beside him, listening to his steady breathing. I thought of all the moments I had stayed silent to keep peace, all the times I had told myself it was temporary, and I realized every compromise I made only taught Kevin and Jane that I would accept more. I couldn't keep teaching my son that love meant silence. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, my decision hardening with every minute. If Kevin wanted to push me out, I would not beg to stay. I would not raise Martin in a home where cruelty was disguised as family. The cake had been more than dessert. It was the symbol of everything broken in our marriage. And it was the moment I knew I had to start planning my escape. The morning after the cake incident felt heavier than any before. I woke to the sound of muffled sobs. Martin stood by his bed, his tiny hands clutching the broken pieces of his piggy bank. Coins were scattered across the floor, but most of the bills were gone. His cheeks were streaked with tears. "Mom," he whimpered, holding out the shattered ceramic. "Someone broke it. My money is gone." My stomach dropped. That piggy bank was a gift from my father. Martin had saved every coin and dollar from birthdays and chores, whispering goodnight to it each evening. It wasn't just money, it was his little dream, his pride. I crouched down, hugging him close. "Who did this?" I asked softly, though I already knew. Kevin walked in, casually adjusting his tie. "Jane needed money," he said flatly. "Don't make it a big deal. She'll pay it back someday." My blood boiled. "You let her steal from our son," my voice cracked. Kevin shrugged. "He's a kid. He doesn't need it. Stop being dramatic." Martin clung to me, his small body shaking. I rocked him gently, tears sliding down my own cheeks. In that moment, I didn't just feel anger. I felt grief. Grief for the innocence Kevin had trampled. Grief for the father Martin had lost, even while living under the same roof. I whispered into Martin's hair, "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Mommy's here." He pressed his wet face against my chest and nodded as if trying to be brave for me. Later that morning, Kevin stormed into the bedroom holding a stack of papers. He shoved them into my hands. My fingers trembled as I read the bold letters across the top: divorce agreement. "You wanted freedom, there it is," he sneered. "Sign it and get out. You'll leave with nothing." The room spun. My knees weakened, but I forced myself to stay upright. The papers weren't fresh, they were dated weeks ago. He had planned this. He had been waiting. Martin appeared in the doorway, his eyes wide. He had never seen Kevin like this. His small voice broke the silence. "Dad, are you making Mom go away?" Kevin didn't even glance at him. He slammed the door on his way out, the sound echoing through the house like a gunshot. I held the papers, staring at them through blurred vision. For years I had buried my pain, convincing myself that endurance was strength. But holding those divorce papers, I realized the truth: Kevin had never considered me family. He had only been waiting for the moment to discard me. That evening I skipped sending Martin to daycare. Instead, we spent the day together. We walked to the park, played hide and seek, slid down the bright yellow slide until he collapsed in giggles. For the first time in a long time, I saw him carefree. At lunch, he fell asleep on my lap, his little face peaceful. I stroked his hair, fighting back tears. I realized then this was my family. Not Kevin, not Jane, just me and my son. And as I sat there watching him sleep, a powerful resolve settled over me. I could not keep sacrificing my son's joy to protect a marriage that had already died. Before I continue, I want to pause and ask you, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you fight for the marriage, or would you walk away for the sake of your child? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stand beside me as this story unfolds, don't forget to subscribe. Together we can remind each other that silence is never strength. That day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I tucked the divorce papers into my bag. I wasn't ready to sign them yet, but I knew the time was coming. And when it did, I would make sure Martin and I walked away with dignity. The night Kevin shoved those divorce papers into my hands, I barely slept. Every creak in the house felt like a warning, every shadow on the wall a reminder that my home was no longer safe. Martin curled against me, whispering in his dreams, clutching his toy car like a lifeline. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the storm building inside my chest. By morning, Jane was gone. Her absence brought no peace, only suspicion. As I prepared breakfast, I noticed Martin sitting quietly at the table, his eyes still swollen from crying. "Mom, he asked if Dad makes you leave, can I go too?" My throat tightened. I knelt beside him, cupping his face. "Sweetheart, I will never leave you behind. Wherever I go, you go." We skipped daycare that day. I wanted him close. We visited the park, played in the sandbox, and laughed on the swings. For a few hours, we pretended the world was still kind. He fell asleep on my lap at lunchtime, his breath soft against me. I stroked his hair, vowing silently that he would never again have to wonder where he belonged. But peace never lasts long in a house poisoned by betrayal. That afternoon, while Martin napped, the front door clicked open. My heart raced. Kevin wasn't due home for hours. I grabbed Martin, pressed a hand over his small chest to keep him quiet, and slipped into the closet. Through the slats, I saw Jane. She stomped through the house, opening drawers, rifling through shelves, muttering under her breath. "Where is it?" He said it would be here. My pulse pounded. I clutched Martin tighter as she dialed her phone. "Kevin," she hissed, "I can't find it. Are you sure she keeps the cards here?" A pause, then a frustrated sigh. "Fine, I'll check again later." When she finally slammed the door and left, I exhaled, shaking with fury. Martin blinked up at me, confused. I pressed my finger to my lips, whispering, "Shh, it's okay. Mommy's here." But inside, I knew it wasn't okay. Jane wasn't just overstepping, she was hunting. That night, I packed essentials for me and Martin. Clothes, important documents, and the divorce papers Kevin had thrown at me. With trembling hands, I locked the door behind us and took the train to my parents' house just 2 stations away. I hadn't called ahead, but when my mother opened the door, her eyes softened instantly. She pulled us inside without asking questions. In the warmth of my childhood home, I finally broke. Between sobs, I confessed everything: Kevin's threats, Jane's intrusion, the broken piggy bank, the cake, the divorce papers. My father's jaw tightened. My mother held Martin close, whispering soothing words as his small body relaxed for the first time in days. That evening, as we sat around the kitchen table, my father leaned forward. "Charlotte, she wasn't looking for spare change. She wanted your accounts." He was right. Memories rushed back my former life before Kevin, when I was a CEO in the handmade goods industry. I had stepped back after marriage, but I still communicated with the company, still received income. Kevin didn't know the full truth. To him, I was just a part-time worker with modest savings. But in reality, I had far more put aside. Jane's search wasn't random. They wanted my money. The realization cut deep. Kevin hadn't just failed as a husband or father, he had plotted against me. The man who promised to protect me had conspired with his sister to strip me of everything. That night, I placed my valuables into my parents' safe. My father rested a hand on my shoulder. "You are not alone anymore." I nodded, but inside, I knew this was only the beginning. If Kevin wanted to play with lies, I would fight with truth. I woke the next morning in my old bedroom, the pale curtains glowing with soft light. Martin was curled up beside me, his tiny arm draped across my waist. For the first time in weeks, I felt the faint warmth of safety. But safety was fragile. Kevin still held those divorce papers, and Jane had already invaded my home once. I couldn't let my guard down. At breakfast, my father pushed a cup of coffee toward me. "Charlotte, if Jane was hunting through your things, she and Kevin are desperate. They won't stop." His voice was calm but firm, each word landing like a warning. I nodded. "They want my savings. They think I'm hiding something." My mother frowned. "Aren't you?" I sighed. It was time to stop keeping secrets. I never told Kevin the whole truth. Before marriage, I was a CEO in the handmade goods industry. I built that company from the ground up. When I stepped back, I entrusted it to friends, but I still receive income. Kevin thinks I only make a little from part-time work. Their eyes widened. My father leaned back, his expression darkening. Then that's exactly what Jane was looking for your accounts. A shiver ran through me. Kevin had convinced me to sign a post-marital property waiver years ago, telling me it was just paperwork. I hadn't questioned it then. Now I realized it was his insurance. He had been preparing for this moment all along. Martin wandered into the kitchen with his stuffed dog. "Mom," he said softly, "why did Aunt Jane take my money?" His little voice cracked. My mother wrapped him in her arms. My father's face reddened with fury. "I'll talk to Kevin," he growled. "No one steals from my grandson." But confrontation alone wasn't enough. I needed proof evidence of what Kevin and Jane were plotting. My father's lawyer friend, Mr. Harris, agreed. Record everything he advised. The court won't listen to accusations, but they'll listen to evidence. That afternoon, I returned to the house with Martin. I cooked dinner deliberately, leaving my phone on the counter recording. When Kevin arrived, his eyes were sharper than usual, scanning the room like a predator. "Where are the cash cards, Charlotte?" he demanded. My stomach tightened. "What cash cards?" "Don't play dumb," he snapped. "You've been hiding money. Jane needs it. Hand it over." I said nothing. My silence was an answer in itself. His voice rose angrier. "You live off my money. You don't need to save for Martin. Stop being selfish." Martin clutched my leg, his little eyes wide with fear. And then Kevin said the words that scorched my soul. "Jane is more important than him." The room spun. My knees nearly gave out, but I steadied myself, wrapping my arm around Martin. I didn't scream, didn't fight. I simply reached for the divorce papers, slipped them into my bag, and said quietly, "Then this house is no longer mine." Kevin barked after me, "If you leave, don't come back." His voice thundered through the walls, but I didn't turn back. I tightened my grip on Martin's hand and walked out the door. That night, as we sat once again in my parents' living room, I replayed the recording for them. Kevin's voice filled the room, cruel and undeniable. My father's hands curled into fists. My mother wept softly, holding Martin. I knew then that I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was building a case. And for once, Kevin's arrogance had handed me the weapon I needed. "Tell me, if you were standing in my shoes, what would you do next? Would you keep fighting for evidence or walk away immediately?" Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe no one should ever have to choose between dignity and survival, subscribe now. Your support gives power to voices like mine. That night, Martin curled up in my lap, whispering, "Mom, we can live here forever, right?" I kissed the top of his head and whispered back, "Yes, sweetheart, forever." And for the first time, I meant it. The days that followed were a blur of strategy and survival. My parents insisted Martin and I stay with them permanently, at least until the legal process began. Their house, though smaller than mine, felt alive with warmth, something Kevin's house had lacked for years. Still, the shadow of what he might do next lingered over me. Martin adjusted quickly. He spent his afternoons helping my father in the garden, his laughter echoing across the yard. Watching him plant seeds with his tiny hands, I realized how much joy he had been missing. But each time he laughed, I felt a sting of guilt. How long had I allowed Kevin and Jane to chip away at his childhood before I finally took action? At night, I lay awake, staring at the divorce papers in my bag. Kevin's signature was already there. Mine wasn't. I wasn't afraid of leaving him. I was afraid of what he might do once I did. Kevin was not the type to surrender control easily. My father noticed my hesitation. One evening, he placed a hand on my shoulder. "Charlotte, men like him count on your fear. That's how they win. But you have something more powerful, proof and family who will stand by you." He was right. I had the recording. I had evidence of Jane stealing from Martin. And most importantly, I had Martin himself living testimony of what it meant to endure cruelty under Kevin's roof. The following day, I met with Mr. Harris, my father's lawyer friend. We sat in his office, the walls lined with heavy books, the air thick with authority. He listened patiently as I recounted everything, then leaned forward. "Charlotte, this isn't just a divorce. This is about custody and protecting your assets. If we move quickly, Kevin won't have time to twist the narrative." I nodded, my hands trembling as I signed the first set of documents. It felt surreal, like I was unhooking chains that had bound me for years. That evening, back at my parents' house, Martin climbed onto my lap holding a picture book. He pointed at the illustration of a family. Mom, is this us? I looked closely. The picture showed a smiling mother, a child, and a dog. No father. My throat tightened. Yes, sweetheart, that's us. He smiled with relief, hugging me tightly. For the first time, he seemed at peace with the absence of his father. Perhaps he understood more than I realized. But peace was brief. That night, my phone lit up with messages, over 50 missed calls from Kevin. The texts ranged from cold demands to pitiful apologies. Come back. We can fix this. Jane didn't mean it. You're overreacting. I turned the phone face down. My decision was made. Before I go further, I want to ask, if someone tried to drag you back into a toxic place, would you answer their calls, or would you cut them off completely? Share your answer in the comments. And if you want to follow every step of this battle, subscribe now. Your support matters more than you think. The next morning, I gathered my courage and explained to Martin, "Sweetheart, Mommy and Daddy won't live together anymore, but you and I will always be together." He blinked, then smiled softly. "That's okay, Mom. We can be our own family." Tears filled my eyes as he hugged me. In that embrace, I knew my son didn't need a broken home patched together with lies. He needed truth. He needed love. And I was finally ready to give him both. The day I returned to my old house to gather the rest of my belongings, the air felt heavy with dread. I had arranged for my father to wait in the car with Martin. I didn't want my son to see what might unfold inside those walls. As I unlocked the door, the familiar smell of detergent and stale food hit me. It was no longer home. It was a battleground. My hands shook as I walked toward the kitchen, where so many arguments had played out like broken records. I pulled out my phone, ready to record if necessary. Kevin arrived sooner than I expected. He slammed the door behind him, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. His eyes darted to the bag slung over my shoulder. "You're not taking anything without my say-so." I steadied myself. "I'm here for what belongs to me, that's all." His laugh was low and mocking. "Everything here belongs to me. You're just a guest who overstayed her welcome." I bit back the anger rising in my chest. "Then why did you marry me, Kevin? Why did you promise a family if I was never more than a guest?" His face hardened. "Because I thought you'd know your place. You didn't. And now Jane is paying the price for your arrogance." The mention of Jane startled me. "What do you mean?" He smirked. "She's drowning in debt and I'm the guarantor. Do you know what happens if she can't pay? I lose everything. So yes, I expected you to step up. You have money, Charlotte. Don't lie. I know it." His words confirmed everything I feared. He hadn't married me for love. He had married me for leverage. My silence, my savings, my willingness to bend had been his safety net. I clenched my fists, trying to steady my voice. "That money is for Martin, not for your sister's gambling. Not for your mistakes." His voice rose. "Martin doesn't need it. He's 4 years old. Jane is family, she comes first." The words sliced through me. I had heard his cruelty before, but this was the clearest confession, yet my son meant less to him than his sister. I pulled out the divorce papers, my hand trembling but firm. "Then this ends here." His face twisted with rage. He lunged forward, trying to snatch the bag from my shoulder. My phone clattered to the floor, still recording, catching every word, every sound of his desperation. "Sign them," he growled. "Sign them now and leave with nothing." I stared him down, heart pounding. "I won't sign under threat. I'll sign on my terms. And when I do, the world will know who you really are." The room went still. For a moment, even Kevin looked shaken by the force in my voice. I grabbed my phone, scooped up the bag, and walked toward the door. He shouted after me, his voice cracking with fury and fear. "If you walk out, don't ever come back." I paused at the threshold, turning just enough to look him in the eye. That's exactly the plan. I stepped outside into the crisp air, my father waiting at the curb. Martin looked up from the back seat, his face anxious until he saw me. When I smiled at him, his shoulders relaxed. As I climbed into the car, I clutched the divorce papers and the recording. I knew I had everything I needed to break free. And yet a part of me couldn't stop asking, what would he do next? Because men like Kevin don't simply let go. They fight, they claw, and sometimes they destroy everything in their path. Stay with me. The truth of what I discovered next will change everything you think you know about this story. The ride back to my parents' house was silent, except for Martin's soft humming in the back seat. My father gripped the wheel tightly, his jaw-clenched eyes, locked on the road. I sat with the divorce papers pressed to my lap. my phone still recording Kevin's poisonous words echoing in my head. Jane is family. Martin doesn't matter. When we arrived, my mother opened the door, her eyes searching my face. "Charlotte?" I nodded weakly. "I have it, the proof." That evening, we sat together at the kitchen table. My father replayed the recording, each cruel word filling the room. Kevin's voice, filled with arrogance and desperation, was undeniable evidence of his betrayal. Martin sat on my lap, wide-eyed but silent, as though even at 4 years old he understood that something important was happening. Afterward, Martin whispered, "Mom, does this mean we don't have to go back?" His little voice cracked like glass. I kissed his forehead. "No, sweetheart, we're not going back." The decision was final, but the consequences were just beginning. The next morning, Kevin's fury arrived in the form of messages. Over 100 in less than a day, demands apologies, threats pleas. He shifted between anger and pity, promising to change, then cursing me for leaving. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on Martin. I wanted him to feel safe again. We spent the afternoon baking cookies with my mother. His laughter returned, flour dusting his cheeks. Watching him lick the spoon, I realized how close I had come to letting him grow up, believing love meant sacrifice and silence. But even in that warmth, I couldn't ignore the looming storm. Kevin was unpredictable, and Jane, she was desperate. That evening, Mr. Harris, the lawyer, stopped by. He laid out the legal path clearly. "Charlotte, you have every right to custody. Kevin's neglect and his prioritization of Jane are on record now, but you need to prepare for retaliation. He may try to paint you as unstable, claim you hid money, or worse." I exhaled, my hands shaking around the teacup. He already believes I'm hiding something. That's why Jane was searching. Mr. Harris nodded grimly. "Then you must secure every asset. Transfer what you can into accounts only accessible through your parents' safe. From now on, assume Kevin and Jane will stop at nothing." Martin tugged at my sleeve just then, holding up a drawing he had made. It showed the three of us, me, him, and my parents, smiling under a bright sun. He had drawn a big X over a shadowy figure standing apart. "That's Daddy," he whispered. "He doesn't live with us anymore." The picture nearly broke me, not because of the X, but because of the relief in Martin's eyes. He was no longer afraid of letting go. "Let me pause here and ask you something. If you were watching a loved one suffer because of another's betrayal, would you step in, or would you wait for them to find their strength? Share your thoughts below. I want to know how you see it. And if you believe every child deserves safety, subscribe, so this story reaches more people who need to hear it." That night, as I tucked Martin into bed, he asked softly, "Mom, are we free now?" I smoothed his hair back and smiled through my tears. "Almost, sweetheart. We're almost there." But deep down, I knew Kevin wasn't finished. He had already lost control of me, and soon he would lose his grip on Martin too. And men like Kevin, they don't let go quietly. The following week was a strange mix of calm and chaos. Inside my parents' home, there was warmth, meals together, Martin's laughter, the gentle rhythm of normal life. But outside those walls, Kevin's storm raged. He left voicemails late at night, his voice shifting between rage and desperation. "You can't do this to me, Charlotte. You owe me. You wouldn't even survive without me." Then only minutes later, another message would arrive. "Please come back. We can fix this. Jane won't come around anymore. I'll change." I stopped listening after a while. Each word was poison. Each plea reminded me of the years I had wasted believing him. One evening, as I sat in the living room folding Martin's laundry, my father walked in holding his phone. "He called me too," he said. "He begged me to convince you to return. Said he's lost without you." I looked at my father, waiting for judgment, for pressure to reconcile. Instead, he shook his head firmly. "You're not going back. Not after what he's done to Martin." The relief that washed over me was indescribable. For years, Kevin had twisted my perception, made me believe I was selfish for wanting boundaries. But now I had validation from the man who raised me. Meanwhile, Martin was flourishing. He played outside with neighborhood kids, something Kevin never encouraged. He helped my mother bake bread, his little hands dusted with flour, grinning proudly at the loaves he shaped. He even started sleeping more peacefully, no longer clinging to me in fear of Kevin's outbursts. But beneath the joy was still the looming weight of legal battles. Mr. Harris filed the paperwork, ensuring custody leaned in my favor. Kevin had already signed away much of his leverage when he threw the divorce papers at me in a fit of anger. Now, all that remained was negotiation over child support. One afternoon, as I sat with Mr. Harris reviewing documents, Martin ran in, clutching his piggy bank, now taped back together. He held it high, beaming. "Look, Mom, Grandpa fixed it." Tears stung my eyes. That broken piggy bank had symbolized everything Kevin and Jane had stolen from us. Now patched with tape and filled with a few coins, it became a new symbol of resilience. "Can I save again, Mom?" Martin asked earnestly. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, pulling him close. "You can save again, and this time no one will ever take it from you." That night, as Martin drifted to sleep, I sat by his bed, reflecting on how much had changed in just weeks. I had gone from silent endurance to active resistance. And with each step, I wasn't just reclaiming my own freedom. I was showing my son what it means to fight for dignity. But the battle wasn't over. Kevin hadn't yet faced the consequences of his choices. Jane's debts loomed large, and I knew they were both desperate. The real confrontation still lay ahead. I stared at the ceiling, clutching the papers, and whispered a silent vow. No matter what comes next, I will not bend again. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand. Over 200 missed calls glared at me from the screen, all from Kevin. My stomach tightened as I scrolled through the flood of messages, some threatening, some begging, others filled with incoherent rambling. "Charlotte, you don't understand. Jane needs me. If you love me, you'll help. You're destroying this family. I can't live without you. Please." The contradiction in his words revealed his unraveling mind. Love and threats, guilt and blame, it was the same cycle that had held me captive for years. I shut the phone off and pressed it into the drawer. Martin shuffled into the room, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, was that Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered, "but we don't have to answer anymore." We spent the day at my parents' house trying to ignore the storm outside. My mother cooked Martin's favorite dish, hamburgers, and he squealed with delight. Sitting at the table watching him bite into the food with pure joy, I felt tears sting my eyes. My mother reached across, touching my hand gently. "You and Martin are safe here. You don't need him." For the first time in years, I let myself believe it. That evening, Mr. Harris visited with news that made my blood run cold. "Charlotte, I did some digging," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Jane has accumulated severe debt, casinos, credit cards, shopping. Kevin signed as her guarantor. If she defaults, he's responsible. That's why he's after your accounts." I sat in silence, my breath shallow. It wasn't just greed, it was desperation. Kevin wasn't defending his sister out of loyalty. He was protecting himself from financial ruin. "They'll come harder now," Mr. Harris warned. "Be prepared." My father's fists tightened on the table. "Let them come. They won't get a cent from her." Martin, sitting beside me, looked between us with wide eyes. "Mom, is Daddy in trouble?" I pulled him close. "Yes, sweetheart, but his trouble isn't ours anymore." Still uneased, gnawed at me. If Kevin was desperate enough to steal from his own son's piggy bank, what would he do when the weight of Jane's debts crashed down on him? That night after Martin fell asleep, I sat by the window staring at the dark sky. My heart pounded with a mix of fear and anticipation. Something was coming, I could feel it. And let me tell you this. What I discovered next would shatter any remaining illusion of who Kevin really was. If you think you've heard the worst, stay with me because the darkest truth hadn't even surfaced yet. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, this isn't just about divorce anymore. This is about survival. The morning after Mr. Harris revealed the truth about Jane's debts, I felt strangely calm. Fear had followed me for weeks, but now clarity settled in. Kevin and Jane weren't chasing me because they loved me. They were chasing me because they needed me. Without my savings, they were drowning. I watched Martin play with his stuffed dog in the living room, his laughter filling the space with innocence. He no longer asked about Kevin every day. Instead, he spoke more about Grandma's hamburgers, Grandpa's garden, and the bedtime stories we shared together. He was healing, and so was I. Later that afternoon, my father suggested we formalize everything. The sooner you file, the sooner this ends, he said firmly. So we went back to Mr. Harris's office. I signed the last of the divorce documents, my hand trembling only slightly. Mr. Harris looked satisfied. With these recordings, with his neglect, with the proof of Jane's theft, custody is in your favor. Charlotte, this is more than a divorce, it's protection. When I walked out of that office, the air felt lighter, like I had shed invisible chains. That evening, Martin snuggled beside me on the couch, holding his piggy bank patched with tape. He whispered, "Mom, can we live here forever?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said softly. "This is our home now." He smiled, clutching the piggy bank close as if it were his promise of safety. But the storm outside still tried to claw its way in. Kevin continued to call, his tone shifting again. One voicemail stood out. His voice was hollow, broken. "Charlotte, it's over. The papers went through. I signed. Jane and I, we told our parents. They disowned us." A pause, followed by a choked sob. "I hope you're happy. You've destroyed me." I listened once, then deleted it. His downfall wasn't my victory. It was the result of his own choices. My father poured me a glass of water and sat across the table. "Are you ready for what comes next? He may still try to fight." I nodded. "I'm ready. He can scream, he can beg, but he can't touch us anymore." And before I continue, let me ask, have you ever reached the point where someone's words no longer have power over you? That moment when their voice finally becomes just noise. If you have, share your story in the comments. And if you want to keep following this journey of breaking free, subscribe now. Your support matters. Martin interrupted our conversation by running into the room with the family dog. He laughed as the dog chased him in circles, finally collapsing in a heap of giggles. He looked up at me, his little face flushed. "Mom, he can be my brother, right? We can be a family." Tears pricked my eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, he's your brother now." It was in that moment I realized the truth. Martin wasn't mourning the family we lost. He was embracing the one we had built anew. A family rooted not in obligation, but in love. And with that, I knew we were finally on the right path. The day the divorce was finalized, I felt an unfamiliar stillness. No more waiting, no more bargaining. It was done. Kevin had signed, and so had I. For the first time in years, I was no longer his wife. But freedom came with shadows. That evening, Mr. Harris called to confirm what Kevin had tried to hide. Jane's debts weren't just bad, they were catastrophic. Tens of thousands from casinos, luxury purchases, unpaid loans. Kevin had acted as her guarantor, tying himself to her downfall. Without my savings, there was no escape for them. I sat at the kitchen table, the phone heavy in my hand. My father paced the room, muttering about Kevin's irresponsibility. My mother watched Martin play nearby, her face calm but firm. "Charlotte," she said, "you did the right thing. If you'd stayed, he would have dragged you into their ruin." That night, Kevin called again. His voice was stripped of arrogance, heavy with defeat. "It's over. The court accepted everything. I'll pay child support, $340 a month. That's all I can do. I know it's nothing. I'm sorry." For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered Martin's tears, the broken piggy bank, the cake stolen from his hands. Kevin hadn't just failed me, he had failed his son. When I didn't respond, Kevin's tone shifted again. "Jane and I, we told our parents. They disowned us. They said we're not family anymore." His voice cracked, followed by silence. "Charlotte, I hope you find happiness. I mean that." Then the line went dead. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone. He had finally admitted defeat. Not with rage, but with resignation. Martin wandered in with a drawing he had made me, him, Grandma and Grandpa, standing under a bright yellow sun. No Kevin, no Jane. He held it up proudly. "This is our family now." I hugged him tightly, whispering, "Yes, sweetheart, this is our family." Later that evening, my father poured tea and handed me a small smile. "You're stronger than you think, Charlotte. You've protected Martin and yourself. You've reclaimed your life." I thought back to the woman I once was, the CEO who built a company with determination and grit. That woman had been buried under years of silence and compromise. But she was still here. And now she was ready to lead again. Kevin and Jane's story had ended in ruined, disowned, indebted, broken. Mine was just beginning. But before I tell you how we built our new life, Let me ask, if you were given a chance to start fresh, would you take it, even if it meant letting go of everything you once thought you needed? Share your thoughts below, and if you believe in second chances, subscribe so more people can find strength in these stories. As I tucked Martin into bed that night, he whispered, "Mom, are we safe forever now?" I kissed his forehead. "Yes, sweetheart, forever." And for the first time, I wasn't just reassuring him. I believed it too. When the dust finally settled, I stood at a crossroads. The divorce was complete, the custody secured, and Kevin's voice had become nothing more than a faint echo from a past I no longer wished to carry. For the first time in years, I could breathe freely. But freedom is more than the absence of chains, it is the courage to build again. In the weeks that followed, I returned to the company I had once built. Walking back into that office was like stepping into a forgotten part of myself. My colleagues, many of whom had carried my vision forward, welcomed me with warmth. "Charlotte, we've missed you," one of them said with tears in her eyes. In that moment, I realized I hadn't just abandoned myself in my marriage, I had abandoned a dream. Now I had the chance to reclaim it. Martin thrived too. His laughter filled the house daily, no longer dimmed by the weight of conflict. He ran through my parents' garden with the dog shouting, "Come on, brother." His innocence was still intact, though scarred, and I vowed to protect it fiercely. Every bedtime story, every small promise became a ritual of healing for both of us. Kevin, on the other hand, faded from our lives. His child support of $340 arrived mechanically each month, nothing more than a reminder of a man who had chosen destruction over love. I never blocked his number, but I stopped answering. There was nothing left to say. His silence became the final thread severed. One evening, as Martin and I sat by the fireplace, he turned to me with a serious expression. "Mom, are we happy now?" I looked at him, the glow of the fire lighting his small face. "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered. "We're happy now." And I meant it. Happiness was no longer a distant hope, it was here in the warmth of family, in the freedom to live without fear, in the chance to raise my son without shadows. If you followed me this far, I want you to reflect with me. Do you believe happiness is something we wait for or something we fight to create? Share your thoughts below. I want this to be a space where we learn from each other. And if you've found strength in this journey, don't forget to subscribe. Together we can remind others that walking away isn't weakness, it's the beginning of freedom. As I lay in bed that night, Martin asleep beside me, I felt the quiet hum of peace. My life had been scarred by betrayal, but scars are proof of survival, and survival is the foundation of strength. We had lost a husband, we had lost the illusion of family, but in return, we had gained something far greater: truth, dignity, and the freedom to start again. And with that, our story was no longer about loss. It was about renewal. The quiet that followed was unlike anything I had known. It wasn't the silence of fear or the silence of walking on eggshells. It was the silence of peace. Each morning I woke to the sound of Martin's laughter drifting through my parents' home. He would run into the kitchen, hair tousled, holding the family dog in his arms, as though life had never known darkness. Watching him, I understood something simple, yet profound. Children don't need perfection, they need presence. And I was finally able to give him that without hesitation, without compromise. I returned to my company, not as the same woman who once started it, but as someone stronger, tempered by survival. My colleagues told me they admired my resilience. But I didn't build resilience for admiration, I built it for Martin. He was my reason, my anchor. My reminder that love is an action, not just a word. Sometimes I still think about Kevin and Jane. I wonder if they ever realized the cost of their choices. But their story is no longer mine to carry. Mine is a story of starting over, of breaking free, of creating a life where dignity is non-negotiable. On quiet evenings, Martin curls beside me, his little voice whispering, "Mom, we're safe, right?" I hold him close and answer, "Yes, sweetheart, we're safe." And in that moment, I know we are. Not because the past never happened, but because we chose not to live there anymore. This is our future, now rooted in love, watered by truth, and guarded fiercely by the freedom we fought so hard to claim.